Daniel Carter had never planned to stop near the quiet lake that day. He had been traveling since sunrise, moving through the dry Arizona terrain with nothing but his horse, his packed supplies, and his determination to finish his trading route before nightfall. He was a careful and respectful man, the kind who never caused trouble and always tried to keep his distance from conflicts between settlers and the Apache families who lived in the region. The land was changing. The world was changing. But Daniel preferred to stay in the small space. He understood his work, his routines, and his quiet evenings by a campfire. By noon, the heat pressed heavily on his shoulders. The sun was sharp, turning the rocks pale and the ground warm enough to sting. Daniel felt his water running low, and he knew there was a lake nearby that the Apache people often used. He had passed it many times, always keeping respectful distance. He believed that if a place belonged to another community, it was his responsibility to avoid causing discomfort. But today, he was thirsty. His horse needed water, and the air felt dry enough to crack his throat. So he guided his horse toward the lake, planning only to fill his canteen and leave quietly. As he approached, he heard the sound of water moving gently and the soft echo of laughter. He paused. The laughter was light, not the voices of children, but the soft tones of young women. Daniel immediately felt nervous. He thought maybe a family was gathering there, and he didn't want to intrude. He waited behind the trees, listening, trying to understand whether it was safe or polite to approach. But the heat kept pushing him forward, and his horse snorted impatiently. Daniel decided he would call out first, warn anyone nearby, and then collect his water without going too close. Before he could speak, he stepped around a large rock and suddenly found himself only a few steps away from 3 Apache women standing in the shallows of the lake. They were startled, shocked, and confused. Their hands flew up in embarrassment, and they ducked behind the rocks as quickly as they could. Daniel froze, feeling every muscle in his body lock painfully. He had made a terrible mistake. The lake was a private place for bathing, and he had walked into it without knowing. He immediately turned around, keeping his eyes down on the ground. His voice shook as he said, "I am sorry. I did not know. Please forgive me." His hands were raised in apology, showing he meant no harm, but the women were upset. It wasn't anger in a violent sense, more like deep embarrassment mixed with cultural boundaries. In Apache teachings, moments of privacy were sacred. It was not about modesty for beauty, but about respect, dignity, and honor. A man appearing suddenly in such a moment could be taken very seriously, even if his intention was innocent. One of the women, the eldest, stepped out from behind a rock with a blanket wrapped around her upper body. Her name was Nahila. She was known in her tribe as a strong, clear-minded woman who rarely hesitated when speaking. Her dark eyes were sharp as she looked at Daniel. The other 2 sisters, Tessa and Miana, remained mostly hidden, peeking out from behind her, still unsettled. "You should not have been here," Nahila said in a firm voice. Daniel nodded repeatedly, unable to look up. He kept saying, "I know. I am sorry. I did not mean to disturb anyone." Tessa, the middle sister, whispered something to Nahila in Apache. Miana, the youngest, hugged her blanket and looked half afraid, half furious. The 3 sisters talked quietly among themselves for a moment, their heads close together, their voices low. Daniel waited, feeling like a man about to walk into his own punishment. When the sisters finally approached him again, their steps were slow but determined. Nahila spoke first. "You walked into a private moment. You saw what you should not see." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but could only repeat his apology again. He felt helpless, embarrassed, and ashamed, even though he had simply made an innocent mistake. Nahila's voice grew calmer but still serious. "According to our ways, a man must not see women when they are bathing. It is not allowed. When it happens, the tribe decides what must be done." Daniel swallowed hard. Images of angry warriors, harsh punishments, or being driven away filled his mind. He had heard stories, most of them exaggerated, about how tribes handled dishonor. He never believed them entirely. But right now, fear gripped him. He did not want conflict. He did not want to offend anyone. He wished he could reverse time and take a different path through the forest. But what Nahila said next was something he could never have imagined. "You saw us," she said slowly, "so you must marry us." Daniel looked up in shock, his eyes wide. "What?" he whispered, his voice barely there. He thought he must have heard wrong. Marriage? Him? To one woman, let alone three at once? It felt impossible. Unreal. Like something from a story told around a fire. Tessa crossed her arms and nodded. "This is our choice. You saw us. That means you must take responsibility." Miana bit her lip, clearly nervous but agreeing with her sisters. Daniel felt the world tilt slightly. He tried to speak, but no words came out at first. When he finally managed to breathe, he shook his head gently. "I never meant disrespect. I did not come to watch you. It was an accident. I am sorry, but marriage is a big thing. I cannot decide something like that because of a mistake." The sisters exchanged glances, and Nahila's expression softened just a little. "But to protect the honor of women, the elders will decide. You must come with us." Daniel felt trapped, but there was no threat in their tone, only seriousness. He didn't want to run or argue. He knew that showing respect was the only correct path. So, he nodded. "I will go with you," he said quietly. As they walked through the forest toward the Apache camp, Daniel kept a safe distance behind the sisters, watching the ground, staying silent. The forest was peaceful, the wind soft, but his heart was heavy with worry. What would the tribe think? Would they believe he intruded intentionally? Would they judge him harshly? He knew life among the Apache people was guided by rules of honor and community. He just hoped they would understand his mistake. The long walk gave him time to think. He thought about the sisters. He remembered seeing them from a distance before working around their camp, carrying baskets, gathering wood. They were known for their kindness and strength, but he had never spoken to them closely. He had certainly never imagined being tied to them through marriage. The idea felt too large to process, too sudden to accept. As the trees thinned and the Apache camp came into view, Daniel felt his hands grow cold. Children ran between the huts, elders sat weaving or carving wood, and smoke from cooking fires rose gently into the evening sky. Life moved calmly around him, unaware of the trouble about to unfold. The sisters led him straight toward the center of the camp, where their mother, White Sparrow, sat with two elders. She looked up immediately, sensing something was wrong. When the sisters explained everything, every detail, every emotion, White Sparrow listened silently, her face unchanged, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Daniel stood a few steps away, feeling like a trespasser waiting for judgment. When the explanation ended, the camp fell quiet. All eyes slowly turned toward him. White Sparrow finally spoke, her voice calm and controlled. "You admit what happened?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, I saw them, but by mistake. I did not know they were there. I meant no disrespect." The elders watched him closely. One of them asked, "And you accept responsibility for what your eyes saw?" Daniel hesitated only a moment before answering. "If I caused harm, I will face whatever you decide." The camp remained silent for a long, heavy moment. Daniel felt the weight of the future pressing on him. The sisters stood behind him, waiting for the elders' judgment. No one knew what would happen. The moment stretched like a string pulled too tight. That was the moment Daniel realized his life might be about to change forever, not through danger, but through something far more complicated than he ever expected. The camp was quiet after Daniel's explanation. He could feel the weight of every eye on him, every glance a question, every whisper a judgment. For a moment, he wondered if he had traveled too far, crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. But then he saw the three sisters, Nahila, Tessa, and Miana, standing together. Not with anger, but with quiet determination. They were the reason he was still standing there alive and unhurt. And somehow, that thought gave him courage. White Sparrow, their mother, looked at him steadily. Her eyes were sharp but not unkind. She spoke slowly, so that everyone could hear. "We have heard your words, and we understand your heart. But a mistake like this cannot be ignored lightly. It is a matter of respect and tradition. You must accept the decision of the elders and the sisters themselves." Daniel swallowed hard. "I will respect your decision. I will accept whatever you deem fair," he said, his voice trembling slightly, though he tried to keep it steady. The elders spoke among themselves in low, serious tones. They asked questions, checking his sincerity, his honesty, and his intentions toward the sisters and the tribe. Daniel answered each one carefully, telling the truth about his travels, his trades, and the deep respect he held for their people. He admitted he had never wanted trouble, never wished to offend, and never intended to invade their privacy. Finally, one of the elders turned to the sisters and asked, "Do you choose him? Do you truly wish to accept him? Not out of anger, but because your hearts are willing?" The three sisters looked at each other. There was a moment of hesitation as they measured the truth of their feelings. Then, Nahila stepped forward, her eyes meeting Daniel's for the first time. She said, "Yes, we choose him. We have seen how he treats our people. He is honest. He is kind. He is patient. The accident at the lake only brought this moment sooner." Tessa and Miana nodded in agreement, their faces showing relief mixed with a quiet pride. Daniel could hardly believe what he was hearing. He had expected punishment, exile, or perhaps even anger from the elders. Instead, they had chosen to give him a chance, a path forward, guided by respect and choice. White Sparrow smiled gently, a rare softness in her usually steady gaze. "Marriage in our tribe is not a matter of ownership. It is partnership, respect, and shared life. If you accept them, you accept not just their company, but their courage, their strength, and their support. You must be willing to grow together, learn together, and face the world as a family." Daniel nodded, feeling a deep sense of humility. He had never imagined being part of an Apache family, let alone marrying three strong, intelligent, and brave women. Yet, as he looked at them the way they stood with honesty, courage, and dignity, he felt something shift inside him. This was not a trap or a punishment. This was a path he had been given, and it was one he intended to walk with honor. Over the next few days, Daniel began to learn the ways of the sisters' lives. He helped with daily chores, fetching water, repairing fences, and assisting in the preparation of meals. Each task taught him more than just survival. It taught him respect, patience, and the intricate balance of trust between people. Nahila taught him to weave baskets, showing him the careful movements that made the work both beautiful and useful. Tessa guided him through gathering firewood, explaining which branches were strong and safe to use. Miana shared her knowledge of herbs and simple remedies for minor injuries, teaching him the value of observation and care. Through these shared moments, Daniel began to see the sisters not just as people he had accidentally offended, but as companions, teachers, and friends. He admired their courage, their sense of community, and the pride they held in their culture. Each woman had her own strengths and quirks, but together, they formed a unit that was both strong and gentle, capable of facing life's challenges with wisdom and patience. Daniel also learned about their past. The sisters spoke quietly of their childhoods, the struggles they had faced, and the lessons their mother had taught them. They had grown up with a deep sense of responsibility toward each other and their community. Their laughter was often mixed with seriousness, and their jokes always carried lessons. Daniel listened intently, realizing how much he could learn from them if he kept his mind open. As the days passed, the initial tension of the lake incident faded. The camp began to accept Daniel as one of their own, though still cautiously. Children followed him at a distance, curious about the stranger who had entered their world. Elders watched him with careful eyes, testing his patience, his honesty, and his commitment. Each day he proved himself, not through words alone, but through actions, small and large, showing that he could be trusted, respected, and counted upon. Then came the day of the marriage ceremony. It was simple, in keeping with the tribe's traditions, but it carried a weight of meaning that Daniel would never forget. The ceremony was held at sunset by the lake where the incident had occurred. The golden light reflected on the water, casting a warm glow across the small gathering. White Sparrow stood with the elders, guiding the sisters as they prepared to make their promises. Daniel felt nervous, but the fear was now mixed with a sense of peace. He had learned much about the sisters, about their lives, and about himself. He understood that this marriage was not about obligation, but about mutual respect and choice. When the sisters placed their hands in his, he felt a bond that was both surprising and comforting. It was the beginning of a life built on honesty, care, and shared responsibility. The ceremony concluded with the elders' blessings. They spoke of respect, patience, and the importance of understanding one another. The sisters smiled at Daniel, a mixture of pride and warmth in their eyes. He realized that what had begun as an accident, something that could have caused conflict or anger, had instead become the start of a life full of learning, friendship, and family. In the weeks and months that followed, Daniel adapted to the rhythms of the Apache camp. He learned to ride alongside the sisters as they guided horses, fish in the river, and care for younger children. Each day brought new lessons, new laughter, and new challenges. Through it all, he discovered that the strength of the sisters was not just in their skills, but in their hearts. They were patient, intelligent, and brave, capable of making decisions that shaped not just their lives, but his as well. Daniel's life was forever changed by the incident at the lake. He had come seeking water and rest, only to find himself welcomed into a family that taught him the value of respect, choice, and shared life. The sisters were no longer strangers, no longer the women he had accidentally startled. They were his companions, his teachers, and, in time, the women he loved. Their laughter, their guidance, and their trust became the foundation of a new life, one built on honor, understanding, and the unpredictable ways in which life sometimes leads a man to the place he truly belongs. What had started as a mistake had turned into a blessing. Daniel learned that sometimes accidents are not just mishaps, they are openings to new beginnings. If one approaches them with respect, humility, and an open heart. And as the sun set over the quiet lake each evening, he often thought of that first moment, realizing that seeing the sisters that day had not just been a mistake, it had been the start of a journey he would never forget.